In its fight to drive out the invading Russians, Ukraine has opened a new front in Russia. However, it acts strangely circumspect when it comes to acknowledging that it has sent troops, fired artillery, and flown drones into its neighbor's territory. Officially, nothing is known about the activities of Russian citizens who are attacking from Ukraine while wearing Ukrainian military ID and uniforms. It's Kyiv's contribution to what is now referred to as hybrid warfare in the gray zone of modern conflict. When Russia invaded Ukraine for the first time in 2014, the two terms sparked books and a wave of enraged commentary from a horde of pundits. Then, in Crimea, little green men in odd two-tone sport hunting uniforms and Russian military fatigues started to show up. Vladimir Putin joked when it was suggested that maybe, just maybe, these men were Russian soldiers. You can go to a store and buy any kind of uniform. The official line from Moscow was that the men who stormed the local parliament in Crimea and raised the Russian flag over Simferopol were self-defense units of pro-Russian Ukrainians, eager to subjugate their territory to Moscow. By the time Moscow acknowledged that its forces were in fact in Ukraine, Putin had gained control of a sizable portion of the 14-year-old former Soviet Republic. On May 24, 2023, soldiers from the Russian Volunteer Corps and its allies, the Freedom of Russia Legion, stand next to a captured armored personnel carrier. Now Ukraine is modifying those same strategies on a smaller scale, in an effort to achieve strategic effect. Short cross-border raids into Russia have been carried out by the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom for Russia Legion, both of which are part of Ukraine's defense intelligence structure. Although the terminology and techniques may have changed, the tactic remains the same. In addition to attacking the frontline states of Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique during the 1970s and 1980s, the apartheid regime in South Africa also employed similar methods. In order to weaken the independent African nations that were opposed to its racist rule, Pretoria sent troops on cross-border raids. In traditional false flag attacks against civilians, they frequently pretended to be local liberation fighters, in an effort to erode support for liberation movements. To give authenticity to the atrocities they hoped to blame on others, these groups were frequently formed by fighters from Zimbabwe or Angola. They were frequently led by white men dressed in blackface disguise. The long-term goal and frequently, the outcome was to perpetually throw off balance the country supporting South Africa's internal liberation struggle. Kyiv finds it advantageous to send Russians to invade Russia on its behalf. The tactical effects might be modest. Incursions into border villages for a short time. But the intended result of Russian instability is achieved. Local journalists, terrified and gasping reports on the artillery attacks against Russian towns, have flooded Russian TV. The governor of Belgorod, the area most severely affected by the most recent Ukrainian campaign, evacuated hundreds of civilians, spoke personally with Putin on the phone, and has already been awarded a bravery medal for his actions. In the meantime, the Freedom for Russia Legion is recruiting drone operators on its Telegram channel. It might or might not be responsible for the increasing number of drone attacks that have targeted Russian territory, including Kursk, Smolensk, and Krasnodar, as well as the Kremlin and the affluent Moscow suburbs, beloved by Putin's allies. The idea is to give the impression that the attacks are distinctly Russian, in order to suggest that more Russians are responding to the dissident cry freedom and joining a domestic uprising against Putin. Both the Freedom for Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps claim to have supporters in their native nations. They might in fact. The Russian opposition movement's blue and white flag was flown over Moscow last week by an unknown person. Someone is assisting in either flying or instructing drones to strike Russian targets. In terms of Ukraine, it's best if Russians believe that their countrymen are attacking the Russian government. Even doubt itself is unstable. Russian rhetoric suggests that it is effective. Putin declared in his opening remarks to his Security Council meeting on Friday that ill-wishers must be stopped from destabilizing Russia. As the enemy's efforts to stir up the situation within the Russian Federation have intensified, he said, the Council will concentrate on ensuring domestic political security. Under any circumstances, we must make every effort to prevent them from doing this, said Putin. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the outspoken leader of the Russian mercenary group Wagner, is the best ally Ukraine could have hoped for in this plan. As it was a difficult job and a difficult year, Wagner PMC wants at least 1 month of recovery after the incursions and clashes. He predicted that there would be more fighting, probably this time on Russian soil. Prigozhin continued by criticizing the military leadership of Russia, which was a bonus for Kyiv. He added that we wouldn't be part of this chain because it was controlled by clowns who just treat men as cannon fodder in the Russian chain of command. He said to the Russian generals about the drone attacks on Moscow over the past week, "You stinking animals, what are you doing? You're a pig. Get out of the offices you've been assigned to and stand up so we can defend this nation." The extent to which war has reached Russia alarmed Dmitry Medvedev, a close ally of Putin. He responded in a manner that bordered on hysteria. It is obvious what action must be taken. They must be eliminated completely, not just on a personal level, but also within the hornet's nest itself. We must destroy the regime that has grown in Ukraine, declared Medvedev. Although he may have sounded like a Nazi, his words evoke the genocidal Holodomor of the 1930s, during which an estimated 3 million Ukrainians were purposefully starved to death, middle-class farmers were eliminated, and the Ukrainian language was outlawed by the Soviet Union. But typical Russians might not be impressed by such fulminations. Russian opponents of Vladimir Putin claim they attacked across the border from Ukraine. This is what we do know. Numerous strikes, according to the governor of Belgorod, have recently been reported in Russian border districts. Vyacheslav Gladkov claimed in a lengthy post on his Telegram channel that a large portion of the incoming fire was mortar and artillery against border districts. He continued that there had been damage to the roads, property, and vehicles, and that 12 people had been hurt in Shebekino, a border town, in the previous day. Shebekino was on fire, the battles there are ongoing, a woman who spoke with a pro-Russian Telegram channel claimed, adding, "We have fled the city. Very few of our people are present." Days prior, despite heavy shelling, there was almost no reaction from the Russian military. "We were abandoned," the unidentified woman claimed. CNN is unable to confirm her version of what happened. However, her opinions might become more popular. Additionally, Russia's reaction to the campaign on its soil could destabilize its military operation inside Ukraine, which would then affect domestic politics.